I had the pleasure of interviewing Gil Goldstein, and in this interview we cover a wide range of topics, talking about Gil Evans, of course, and lots of different projects that Gil Goldstein has worked on with lots of amazing jazz musicians. Check it out. By the way, I've been listening to Wide Angles recently, and that's a really beautiful album, so well done on that.
Thank you.
I love the way how you brought all those disparate instruments together and really made it sound like a thing that has its own sound. It was great.
Well, I would say that is something that I learned from Gil. That it was not necessarily about writing for a typical or stereotypical um, you know ensemble. He could create his sound with instruments from many different you know categories. I did the arrangements. I adapted the arrangements orchestrated for the Quincy and Miles concert, and I had Gil's, his sketches, the piano sketches, and it was a little bit of information on there. Sometimes he'd write next to the note heads like flutes, brass, and but I was kind of guessing half the time what the exact instrumentation was. But my joke was always that I could have written it for 19 accordions and it would have sounded like Gil Evans, because the essence of what he gets is from the vibration of the pitches, and it causes this big picture to emerge. It's not necessarily the instruments are not doing it. I don't mean to say that the instruments are not doing it, but it's more about the notes that he's picked than whether he's writing for brass or woodwinds or strings, which he didn't do so much, but he did with Helen Merrill, and you can hear it on that record or other records that he did write for strings. That it's just it could have been woodwinds, and it would have had the same impact. And a lot of times when I do Gil Evans projects, I'm interested in reorchestrating. I don't think Gil, if he had still been with us and had continued to do additional versions of his music, I don't believe he would have done them verbatim. I think he would have looked for, other sonic varieties of it, because he kind of nailed what he did when he did it, and just my impression of his personality, he would have tried to reorchestrate or adapt those arrangements.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of relates to what he did later on in his life. I guess when you were in the band, right? Some of those charts were redone for that group.
It's a little bit hard to explain that the version of those bands. I mean, the thing that Gil always said to me was, he, he said at that point he was kind of tired of thinking of new voicings for a D minor seventh chord, and he wanted to, see what emerged. And Gil was an improviser and an experimenter, and he encouraged Miles to do the same. On records like Miles in the Sky and Fees of Kilimanjaro, he could do with very little, in terms of a chart, and he would kind of. I think these guys are going to be able to fill in the blanks very nicely, and he was very good at doing that. And that to me was a big part of Gil as an arranger, that he kind of let things go. He could keep it very tightly hewn in, it was like really constructed, but he still wanted, I believe, everyone to feel like they were free within that context. And then by the same token, he also liked really free, where it's like, let me just see what is going to happen here. He liked it and he hated it at the same time. He said to me one night, he goes, we finished a tune and then somebody would start playing something else and then it would go to this. And he said, that's one thing this band can't do, stop on a dime. But he was in favor of letting things go. And I think that's a great quality of Gil, and a quality that I try to aspire to, And actually, that you mentioned the Michael Brecker record. In truth, the first time I really played with Michael was on a concert with Gil Evans in Lugano, Switzerland, with Billy Cobham, that came out as the Gil Evans Orchestra live in Switzerland. And Mike, to be honest with you, hated that concert because it was so loose, and also because he couldn't get a solo in. Everybody would jump up and play. It was just Now, I happen to love that concert. There was something about it that reminded me of just the Milesness that I knew from the records that I loved, the Miles that were loose, that Gil was involved with. But in the arrangement that I did of Scylla on Mike's record, Mike had tried to record that song several times with very strict chords as the blowing section and a very strict, it was originally called Chicky Thing, and he had written it kind of as a Chick Corea inspiration. It was kind of Latin-y Chick kind of vibe. And I thought to go slightly different, and when we started to solo, just make it open A minor, and then there was another section of open B flat minor, and then at the end I had written out some glissandi and some little figures that had appeared in the beginning, and after 8 bars I said, we can improvise after that in a kind of a Gil Evans way. And from the first, that was the first take that's on the record. And, you can hear Mike kind of stop and like listen for a second and go, oh, wow, okay, here we go. I'm with it, and he just went, in all honesty, I think we maybe had edited out like maybe a minute of the real big part of it, and found a way to edge it down again, and it ended quite naturally too. So it's just missing a little bit. And I remember Mark Feldman, who was a prime instigator of the improvisation, especially in the strings, and the strings seemed to kind of dominate the improvisation. The woodwinds kind of were very polite and kind of didn't try to upset the apple cart, and also the brass was just kind of sitting there, and they saw things were going on, and they tried not to upset anything, I think. And then Mark Feldman said, man, when that record came out, he said, I was sure that whole ending was going to get edited out. And I said, no, that was a highlight. And so anyway, that's kind of ties together Mike Brecker and Gil Evans, so. And in the end, Mike really loved the Gil Evans freedom thing, and he really embraced it. And And everything that I wrote on that record is in some way a tribute to Gil. Things that I learned from Gil, just keeping, things in clear, distinct registers and letting Mike have a open lane for his melody and, not trying not to clutter anything and keeping everything. And another thing, I mean, I'm said I don't really believe in techniques, but I don't know if this is a technique. Gil was not really a big doubler. He didn't hear like there was not, in my opinion, the more important parts of Gil is when everybody is playing their own note. It could be in different registers, but it's not a lot of, three saxophones playing a line together or, four trumpets. It happens sometimes, but that's not the real essence of Gil's sound. It's, everyone is in their own registral space, and there's a lot of chances for vibrations to occur between those instruments. This is just my own take on that, is that I always think the idea of, two notes playing the same note at the same time in the same register, it's almost like phase cancellation, no matter what it is. Even in an orchestra, I'm a little, the sound of a giant orchestra and there's 20 violins playing a line. I'm like, really? Is that necessary in the real world that we need 20 people playing the same note and talking at the same time? I'm like, wow, what a waste of, that's just my little hang up, that I think it's a little wasteful.
Yeah, for sure.
But I always like the thing that sometimes Gil has like maybe an alto flute, like really just stuck down there, and you go, no, nobody's going to hear that, and it really doesn't matter because it's vibrating and it, I mean, depending on the acoustics, if it's a live thing or a recording, it's still making a big effect on the sound. I love the idea of that it's in there vibrating and it's casting its overtones onto the picture, and we are hearing it if we're tuned in listeners, and it is affecting it. I did an arrangement. Well, I arranged a lot of Dave Sanborn records, and there was one record that I arranged for him. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was bass clarinet, baritone sax, tuba, trombone. It was a lot of low instruments, and Dave said, "But come on, Gil. I mean, do we really need the bass clarinet in there?" He said, "You're never going to hear it." I said, "Oh no, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it, and you're going to feel it." And he went on to really love the bass clarinet in that ensemble. He was also nervous that if he had to go around the world and pick up bands, we'll never find a good bass clarinet player. And the bass clarinet player was always the guy that blew his mind. He goes, "Do you hear the way that guy plays? His sound is so beautiful. Oh my gosh." I went, "Well, what did I say?" No.
Oh, good.
So,
Yeah.
and I remember as somebody from NYU heard the band and said, "What a ridiculous thing, that you have a bass clarinet down there." I went, "No, you get a lot of criticism for that, like an instrument that doesn't really just show up loud. You can't really hear it clearly." But to me, that's a big part of how arrangements are amazing, that there's these little hidden vibrations that are causing something to happen in our ears and to the notes above it and below it, you know. I kind of live for that thing.
Yeah, I think I do too because, well, obviously I'm a fan, so I'm hearing something that excites me, and I'm a composer, and I remember an earlier piece for me was cello, trombone, and bass clarinet,
Okay,
and
but
yeah.
in just some kind of combination, not particularly in what particular order, in unison
No, no,
or
the
no, and just in voicing.
the entire piece was for those three instruments, and
Okay.
there's moments they played chords and moments where they were um, playing their own melodies. But yeah, it's fun to play with different textures. Basically, is what I'm saying.
Well, as arrangers and orchestrators and composers, we're a little bit obligated, as the a guy that I used to study with, Otto Luning, who was a kind of an electronic music composer and a great American composer in all kind of chamber music and orchestral um, settings. He said to me that I lost my train of thought here. I was thinking of something about Gil, but um, sorry.
So it's all right, experimenting with
Um,
textures.
Oh, yeah, experimentation. He said, we're in the business of research and development of music. We're not doing tried and tested recipes. We are researching and developing what will be and now and in the future. And Gil also, it's a little bit of an embarrassing story to me because I didn't make notes when I was with Gil once, and he said, "Wow, I put together trumpet, soprano, and flute." I remember it was those three instruments, and he told me he voiced them in a certain order that seemed totally weird to me when he said it. Maybe the flute was on the bottom, the soprano was in the middle, and the trumpet was on the top. It was some combination, and he said, "Wow, it sounded so big and beautiful, and I never heard anything like that before." And I went, "Wow." And then I left there and I thought, "Oh no, I forgot what he said." But I said, "But the important thing is that Gil discovered that. And there's a million other things to discover like that. It doesn't have to be a stereotypical stacking of instruments. You know, you can use your common sense. So you go, that instrument's going to jump out if it's in the middle. I have to be careful. And you still have to use musical common sense and intelligence. But please don't stop experimenting. you know.
True. And we were talking a bit about doubling. Sorry, we're getting right into it here. We didn't have much introduction, but it's good. I'm enjoying this. Thank you. Um,
Okay.
um, Gil did double the bass horn often. Bass clarinet, tuba, bass trom, bass clarinet sort of combinations. But
Right, right, right.
I did notice he usually didn't. I mean, of course, usually most of the time didn't have the root note in the voicing. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. He's letting the harmonics spread up through the chord and not or wasting a note or reinforcing it above it.
Right, right. Exactly. What
Yeah.
what song are you thinking of there with the doubled low notes?
Again, that same section of My Ship, you've got a bass clarinet and a bass trom on the bottom, I believe.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Now, I have to say also that one of the first records that ties together Mike Brecker and Gil Evans that I worked on with Mike was his ballad record called "The Nearness of You," and they asked me to help arrange. Pat Metheny was producing it, and I was going to be the arranger and kind of keep track of everything. And um, and then they said, we'd like to record my ship, and I said, well, hey, I could do a reduction of Gil's arrangement. Wouldn't that be nice? And they said, that's what we wanted you to do. And I said, okay, good. So, I wrote out a part for Mike. I wrote a bass part. And then the lion's share was Herbie, who had to fill in most of the other, voices. And that was it. And at one point during the rehearsal, Herbie said to me, Gil, would you mind if I looked at the sketch you did this from, the my ship? I said, oh no, here, look at it. And he goes, that's exactly what I thought. The part that it goes da 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 da, it's B flat on the top. It's a G minor chord, but he has an F sharp in the bass. Boo doo dee doo doo, and I had accidentally written an F. I had mistakenly written an F, and Herbie caught it like that. He went, wait a minute, there's something wrong there. And I was always so impressed with that Herbie knew the arrangement so good. And he was a big fan of the fact that Gil would quite often put a really crunchy note, in the bass against the melody related to the chord. And, that's, and I hear that in every voicing that, Herbie plays. He's trying to, gill it out, by creating those little spicy notes, as Gil called them, that would kind of. Another line that Gil would say to me, he said, he says, I just used church harmony plus one note.
Yeah.
Nice. You've heard that before?
No, but I could see what you mean. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He's talked about it in a million interviews. The one with Ben Sidran, where he says, I've got this E minor and it's got the, here's the spicy note. So anyway, and coincidentally, Mike Brecker's Iwi sound that he would play, and it would sound like harmonized, it generally played some kind of triad off the note. It could be a major chord in a certain inversion, or a minor chord in another inversion, and then it would put in one random crunchy note, which is exactly Gil Evans. And before I did Wide Angles, I did a tour with Mike in England, and we started with that size orchestra. That's how we started doing it, and I had to write out his Iwi solo for the orchestra. And that's what I did. I made triads plus, the one spicy note, and it did sound like an Iwi by the time the orchestra played it. That was something that Mike wanted to record before he had left us. He wanted to do a recording of those songs that were arranged for the quindectet style, instrumentation that we had started before Wide Angles, but he never got to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a shame. Thank you. I'm really enjoying this. On my blog and some of my videos, I talk about counterpoint a bit, because and what I mean with counterpoint is not necessarily in a traditional sense, but the way each line makes sense on its own. And you talked about the F sharp on the bottom in My Ship, and how that actually enhances that bass line, because it makes it rise up to the next note. And I really noticed that with Gil's music, is people obviously say that he really liked voice leading, But I think that helps explain some of his unconventional choices. Would you agree with that?
Definitely, yeah. And I think one of the best examples of that kind of thought is his arrangement of Ella Speed from the first record, Gil plus 10 or Big Stuff. And on Ella Speed, I have a version of Gil's sketch for the arrangement of the first part, which
Oh,
is a
wow.
melody played by I don't forgot who it is, Lightning Hopkins or some blues guitar player. Bo-be, bo-be-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-ba-da-da-da-da. It's this kind of simple. No, I'm thinking of that's the actual melody. The soli is
Yeah.
so it's a very simple, keyboard's not plugged in. And so here's the melody, kind of around a little bit above middle C. And then he's got the second line was the first line that he wrote in before he started filling in all the other voices. And it's at a very dissonant point to the melody. If it starts on an E, I think it started on an F sharp on the bottom. Do da, and then it goes to an F sharp, and I think it went to an F in the second voice down. Do da do da, and if you play the two lines, you go, that's never going to come together. And Gil could fill it in a way that totally smoothed it out in a sense. It made the thing resonant and beautiful chords going along that, and every voice is making a beautiful melodic shape, So that's to me the essence of orchestrating and arranging, that everybody's playing a melody, and um, nobody's not playing a melody.
Yeah. And surely it's got to help it make it swing too, right?
I mean, it makes all the players more invested in what they're doing because they can feel a melodic continuity to what they're doing.
Yeah. So how did you come to join the Gil Evans Orchestra?
I came to join it because I was working, like I said, with Billy Cobham. Oh, maybe I didn't say that, but I was a member of Billy Cobham had a group called the Glass Menagerie, and I played with them for 2 or 3 years. And then Billy wanted to do this program in Lugano that was originally going to be a music education program, and Herbie was there, and Ron Carter and Cheech and Chong were the going to be the MCs of it, and it was on. Yeah, it never really came together though. But Billy did present like 3 or 4 concerts while we were all there. One a trio with Ron and Herbie, and that I think came out. It's called Hurricane. And then the concert that I did with Gil is called the Gil Evans Orchestra Live in Switzerland. And then on the same evening, there was a concert with Louis Bellson with the same lineup, same big band. And it was a kind of a stark contrast because Louis had his charts and he passed them all out, and you know, they were pretty straight ahead, and a lot of drum solos. I remember every song had at least 2 drum solos in it, and so that was that. And then Gil's thing was like, he had very, sometimes he would pass out a concert lead sheet of the score of the piece, And I remember some of the musicians were from Gil's orchestra in New York, and some were filled in European guys um, that were filling out the band and the big band that played with Louis. And one guy said to Gil, he said, "Gil, what are we supposed to play on this thing?" And Gil said, "Pick a line and follow it." And I remember thinking, like, that's so cool. You know, that's Gil Evans, for God's sake. Because I would have pictured him a different type of guy, you know. I would have pictured him a kind of an anal, retentive, like, no, guys, no, 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 it has to be articulated like this, He was anything, if he was anything, he wasn't a nerd.
No.
So he was like super, I'm going to trust you're going to pick a good line to follow, and you're going to play it with a lot of conviction and determination, and it's going to add up to a very nice vibrational thing.
Yeah. And
So
yeah, and obviously this is a lot later than his years with Claude Thornhill, but he obviously must have been figuring out some of these things in those early days, because that music, of course, was much more prescripted and
of
played very
course,
tight.
of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, Gil was a guy that understood both sides of the prescription.
Mm.
And
Oh,
I think you're a complete musician when you know both sides, and
yeah.
you're open to both sides. In jazz, for sure,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And this might be repeating, so we don't need to go over this, but I have heard you say in other interviews that, you found like Gil was really mixing some of the upper partials and harmonics. He was activating higher harmonics than others, and I guess that's just through the techniques we've talked about already.
I think so, yeah.
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 Oh, nice. And he also used such a variety of techniques, like we're talking about triads or church harmony plus one, and then there's,
Right.
cluster things, and then full big band things, voiced quite high or spread. How,
Right.
I mean, the answer to this could be just like musical taste, but how was he able to so convincingly combine all these sounds?
Well, I think for sure he took every new arrangement as, I'm going to approach this fresh and not bring any static solutions to it, and he applied what he thought was the best solutions, like every great composer. You try to write a new piece every time. Now maybe your new piece sounds like your old piece, but you didn't approach it like a routine. You really tried to and Gil's personality was so strong that it ended up sounding like Gil, even though it was different techniques. You know, that's a hard question to answer because I think it's just was part of his process.
Yeah, and
What to choose to do. When I first started arranging for different people that were playing with the Gil Evans Orchestra, like Shunzo Ono. I did some records for him. Chris Hunter, alto saxophonist. It was just all my early arranging project. I would just pour over Gil's scores and say, wow, that's such a cool little technique. And I try to think about a way to repurpose it for or would something like that work for this song, some kind of like bass line moving contrary to the melody. I was always looking for you know some kind of techniques that I could pull out and reuse. and try to make them mine, and in the process. But it was great to be able to start with a sound of his and some kind of general concept in mind, that I could grapple with.
Yeah, of course, and that's how you learn, right? You add colours to your palette, and eventually, sort of, you make your own. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Hey, this has been really enjoyable. What are you working on things at the moment?
I'm working on things. Yeah, I got some things. I'm working on.
Oh, nice.
Nothing really to say at the moment, but I seem to be kind of busy at the moment with arranging and things coming up
Oh,
that I
that's
don't
good.
want to jinx
Sure.
because they're just still there. But one thing I would say that I just did, and where I really tried to apply my Gil thing, is Lenny White, the drummer, composed this very challenging piece. He kind of played it into Logic and created it over a long time, and it's about like a 10-minute piece, and I could kind of extract it out of Logic and hear it in a kind of a Gil way. And Lenny's a big Gil fan, and he worked a lot with Wallace Roney, and they did a really nice project together. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's ever going to see the light of day, of arrangements that Wayne wrote early in his career, even when he was a student. And they did a beautiful record of it, and it really had a Gil Evans thing on it that, kind of that Spanish side of Gil. And you could see Wayne was trying to find a way into that, and they really recorded it very well. Anyway, I tried to apply the Gil thing to Lenny's piece, and so that was kind of fun, And honestly, without Gil, I would have had no idea how to do that, to take his notes and make it sound alive, and to bring it to life in a way that I think seems modern and stimulating to listen to. So that's my point of reference for
What record
what
was
I
that,
do.
may I ask?
No, it's not a record. It's just going to be, he's going to just try to get it performed. Oh, the record with Wallace Roney
Yeah,
is
or
not a
Lenny.
record yet.
Yeah.
Lenny is not. It's not a record yet. He's written like one or two pieces, and he's going to get them performed at some point. I think at NYU they're going to perform it, and he wants to go on and perform it and perfect them and add to them and write more pieces like that and get a whole record someday. But it's for full orchestra
Yeah.
and percussion and
Yeah, the big setup.
yeah.
Yeah. And are things okay over there with COVID, and is music able to happen, and are you doing all right?
I feel like things are starting to come back, and you know, I feel like I'm getting active again after where I just thought everything was finished. So, but I'm excited. And you're in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, fair distance away,
Yeah.
but
How is it there?
I mean we're lucky in a sense that we're an island at the bottom of the world, and
Right.
we have COVID here.
Viruses don't travel down,
No, they.
right? They don't go down.
I don't know about that one. It's definitely here, but
No.
it's easier to control. Oh, I'm pleased to hear things are getting up and going, and
I can only hope to believe that. I just go like, and people that, I expected would be in the front line, like Pat Metheny, he's out there touring now. He's got like a 3 month tour. And I said, Pat, that's great. 3 month tour. He goes, I'm used to longer. He was like, that's a short tour for me. And I went, well, that's a good start though. You know, let's say that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, when those guys start getting out, I go, I'll wait for me to be in the second or third line of troops to go in. But, if I can keep arranging and going into studios, I'm pretty happy. I don't need to. I'm not so passionate to go on stage and express myself like
Mm.
that.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I'd rather be in the background myself.
In the background or in the bunker. I did a session with Keith Richards a couple years ago to help him with some kind of song he was working on. And he goes, I love being in the bunker here. I love this. He goes, I like being on stage too, though. He said, I don't know which one I like better, really. And I said, well, for me, Keith, I prefer being in the bunker. But then thinking about it, I've never been on the stage like you in front of 60,000 people a night. So maybe I would like that more than the bunker. I can't tell because I never had that experience. You've had that
Yeah.
experience, so you'll have to tell me. But anyway,
Oh, maybe just for a couple nights and then back to the bunker.
maybe that would work. That would work.
Yeah, not for
Yeah.
6 months tour.
6 months and 60,000 people, and yeah, I don't know how that would be either.
Yeah. I look forward to hearing what's going to come out of your bunker, and yeah, it'll be fun.
I would
Yeah.
say that the last record, the last two records I did, I kind of like. They were right before the pandemic, though. But I did a
Oh,
duet record with Jorge Pardo, the flamenco flautist
oh yeah.
that played with Paco's group for a million years, and we did a record of standards that we recorded in 3 hours. That's very spontaneous, and we got it a lot of good stuff, I think.
Oh, that sounds
So
beautiful. What was the other one you said you
the
enjoyed?
other one, well, it was not really my main thing, but I did a record with Laura Benanti. She's a big Broadway star, and she's a very smart person and an excellent singer. And I got to arrange for her a record that was produced by Matt Pearson, who picked a very wide variety of songs, but it was a very small complement of orchestra. It was like violin, viola, cello, bass clarinet, and maybe alto flute, or somebody that doubled bass flute and alto flute, maybe even some
Oh,
flute.
nice.
And it really got a very big, lovely sound, honestly. I was very proud of how the whole thing kind of congealed as it's like that. I'm saying it's like that, but it's inspired by the Lucy Reed record, where it's five. Gil wrote for five disparate instruments, and it sounds like 40 people playing. you know, so that's what I was kind of going for, and I felt like it had a good trajectory in that direction.
Mm. Oh, beautiful. I'll check those out.
Yeah, and then it also features the guitarist Pasquale Grasso, who's a real virtuoso on the guitar, and he's managed also by Matt Pearson, who produced it. And Matt said, Gil, would it be all right if Pasquale played on a couple songs? I said, after I had done the arrangements, Actually, one I knew he was going to play on, but he said, could he also play on this one and this one and this one? I said, tell you the truth, Matt, I don't think there's any room for him, because I really did kind of block out, a lot of different registers. And this guy really found a way to find his way into the arrangement. He really arranged on top of my arrangement and created these lovely little things that I don't know many guitarists that could have done that, honestly and truly. It wasn't like he was playing just chords and comping. There were little ideas and motifs, and he just found his way into the arrangement in a very masterful way. This guy should really be an arranger.
Wow.
And to be honest with you, he can improvise an arrangement amazingly. And we did some gigs in the city with Laura Benanti, with him. That was the last gig I did. We played for a week in the city. I don't know, about a month or so ago. And he would do a duet with her. And every night, the intro was different, the shape of the tune was different, the fills were different, and they were daring. It's like the flying trapeze. He's like, it's nothing safe about what he was doing. It could have ended in catastrophe. He'd do some, and she could really posture herself to, okay, here he comes. And, they both really just wove themselves into a beautiful picture every night. So anyway, that's my little... He just did a record with this woman, Samara Joy, and he honestly doesn't do arrangements. He just kind of makes it up, and he does like a thing, and then she sings and he does his thing, and it really sounds like, wow, he figured that all out ahead of time, right? And he really, I can tell you, does not. It's totally improvised.
Wow. That sounds cool. You're a real virtuoso.
And all the guys are totally in awe of him, like Pat and Schofield. And I did a project with Schofield about the last real European thing I did. I did a Beatles project featuring him and a chamber orchestra. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know if that's ever going to... Nobody will probably ever hear that either. But... it was supposed to be a record, but I don't know what happened. And but they're all like Pat and John are like, this guy does stuff on guitar that's impossible. It's impossible. So I go, all right. So he's impressing those guys too. So that says something.
Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right, Alex. Nice meeting you.
All right.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
See you. Thanks for listening, and make sure you go to the blog if you want to look up some of the details of the things we've been talking about.